Hello, my dear friends. Today I'm talking about retrograde Saturn in your birth chart for each house. How it works, what it means due to Hellenistic astrology. Saturn as a planet of boundaries, time, karma, and discipline becomes even more introspective when it's retrograde. This can lead to delays, re-evaluation of responsibilities, and lessons that must be faced. A retrograde planet is moving slower than average. And when it's about visibility, in ancient times, retrograde planets were brighter in the sky, more visible, more potent. Due to traditional view, while retrograde planets are generally considered weakened in medieval astrology, Saturn, being cold and slow by nature, is actually more in line with itself when it's retrograde. Yeah, it's a kind of paradox, isn't it? Let's see how this Saturn retrograde is working in natal chart in each house. Saturn retrograde in the first house often manifests as a reserved, serious, or self-contained personality. These people may feel older than their peers from a young age, carrying a sense of responsibility or weight that sets them apart. Unlike the confident or impulsive expressions often associated with the first house, this placement fosters introspection and self-regulation. The retrograde motion intensifies Saturn's lessons by turning them inward. Identity development may be slow, shaped by self-doubt, insecurities, or a deep need for approval. The native may question their right to take up space, to lead, or to initiate. This can manifest as shyness, hesitation, or chronic self-motivation, especially during youth. However, over time, Saturn in this position cultivates a core of inner strength and authenticity. The native learns to act not from ego, but from integrity. They often emerge as deeply grounded individuals whose presence commands respect not through dominance, but through quiet authority earned by enduring life's tests. Yeah, it's quite correct because I saw around me people with displacement and they are very good in what they are doing. They have impact all over the place in a good way because they are serious, they are very well organized, they have a very good skill to organize tasks, people, or whatever. They can be very good project managers. In traditional astrology, Saturn in the first house was considered a placement of severity, often linked to slow physical development, poor health in youth, or melancholy temperament. Yet it also gave the potential for longevity, endurance, and wisdom, particularly when Saturn was dignified or configured with benefics. Benefics means Jupiter and Venus. When retrograde, Saturn influence becomes more introspective. The native often builds their identity through personal struggle and isolation, becoming their own authority figure over time. Arabic astrologers describe this placement as one of slow emergence into power. The person may walk a solitary or difficult path, especially in early life, but eventually gains honor and stability. The first house being angular gives Saturn here an especially strong influence on the life path, often related to leadership roles achieved through time, work, and experience. When it's about sect consideration, Saturn functions better in night charts. In a night chart, this placement is softened and more internalized, leading to a quiet type of mastery. In day charts, it may present as external obstacles or harsh expectations from others through still producing strength over time. When it's about psychological and practical implications, Saturn retrograde in first house teaches self-definition through solitude, patience, and boundaries. The person may not feel comfortable asserting themselves or expressing desires directly. Instead, they slowly build a self-concept that is strong, durable, and often unshakable. There may be periods of feeling invisible, awkward, or misunderstood. Some with this placement compensate through overwork, perfectionism, or excessive self-control. Others withdraw, afraid to risk vulnerability. Health-wise, Saturn here may relate to chronic conditions, rigidity in the body, or the need for structured routines to maintain vitality. However, these challenges can lead to a deep understanding of the body and its limits, and to long-term health management through discipline. Professionally, this placement favors careers requiring persistence, integrity, and maturity. Over time, these people may become mentors, leaders, or elders in their communities, not because they chase power, but because they earn trust. What challenges people have with Saturn retrograde in the first house? Delayed self-confidence, isolation, somatic tension. Growth happens when the native learns to validate themselves without needing constant reassurance, embraces solitude as a source of strength, not punishment, develops a patient relationship with the body, honoring its needs and limitations, understands that identity is forged through time and testing. It's not about instant recognition. A famous person with Saturn retrograde in the first house is Elton John, and the Saturn retrograde is in Leo. Because Leo is very creative, it's on the stage. Elton John had the persistence, talents, seriosity, whatever. I saw him when he came to sing in Romania many years ago. There had not been done too much publicity to his concert, but I have been there. Not too many people, but he was singing perfectly. He was really amazing. So he proved his quality as a perfect artist, because no matter how many people is coming to your show, you give the same quality of your skills and talents. This is a very good quality. Saturn retrograde in the second house. This Saturn retrograde slows down the usual external progress related to finances and possessions. This may mean that the native experiences delays or obstacles in accumulating wealth, or that resources seem harder to come by at first. However, these challenges are not simply about money. They are deeply tied to your internal relationship with value and security. Also, your own value, how you value yourself. Because Saturn symbolizes discipline, boundaries, and responsibility, its retrograde motion in the second house often signals a karmic test around how you value yourself beyond material success. You might find that external validation through possessions or money feels hollow or fleeting. Instead, you are called to develop a stable, internalized sense of worth that doesn't depend on outside circumstances. This placement can create a kind of double bond. On one hand, you may feel frustrated by financial constraints or slow progress. On the other hand, these constraints push you to cultivate patience, prudence, and resourcefulness. Over time, the lessons here build an inner security stronger than any bank balance. In traditional astrology, Saturn's rulership over limitations and time means that wealth acquired under its influence comes slowly, often later in life, and only after consistent effort. when retrograde Saturn's effect becomes more internalized. The native may not openly display wealth or may prefer financial privacy. Or it's about common sense to use resources, not to show off only because you have a lot of wealth. This is a wise way to live. Arabic astrology often connects the second house with inherited assets and family financial legacy. A retrograde Saturn here might indicate that financial lessons or burdens come through family karma, perhaps inherited debts, losses, or patterns of scarcity passed through generations. The native may also have to learn to rebuild or restore family wealth in some way, which requires a cautious and responsible approach. Psychological and practical implications. Saturn retrograde in the second house frequently triggers deep reflection on self-worth and values, to excessive fragility or fear of spending even when it's necessary. Such a placement encourages the development of a structured financial plan and a methodical approach to money management. Impulsivity or risk-taking with finances often leads to harsh lessons, reinforcing the need for discipline. On the positive side, people with this placement often develop a remarkable ability to make the most out of the limited resources, so to be very efficient to use resources. They are practical and able to build financial stability gradually. This placement can foster an inner wisdom about the true value of things beyond their price tags. Which can be challenges? Delayed financial stability, issues with self-worth, fear of loss, inherited financial karma. Growth happens when the native learns to cultivate self-worth independently of external possessions, embraces delayed gratifications as a form of maturity, understanding that slow and steady wins the race, develops clear financial boundaries and practical skills, finds value in intangible resources like wisdom, relationships, and personal integrity. The famous people with Saturn retrograde in the second house is, for example, Rafael Nadal. Saturn retrograde in the third house. In this house, Saturn manifests as a careful, sometimes cautious approach to communication and learning. People with this placement may initially struggle to express themselves openly, preferring to think things through thoughtfully before speaking or writing. This cautiousness can sometimes be mistaken for shyness or social withdrawal, but is really a manifestation of a deep internal process. These people often develop a strong inner voice and a capacity for profound thoughts, but they may delay sharing their ideas with the world. In traditional astrology, the third house is associated with siblings and early schooling. Saturn here, especially retrograde, can suggest delays or difficulties in these areas. The native might experience complex or serious relationships with siblings, or they might have faced challenges in early education that pushes them toward more solitary learning styles. Hellenistic astrology often points to Saturn's rulership over the voice and the expression of thoughts. The voice is sober, serious, and sometimes low in volume or restrained. The person might have a tendency to hold back, speaking only when they feel absolutely necessary or when they have something important to say. This can also foster an excellent capacity for teaching, writing, or any intellectual pursuit that benefits from methodical thoughts. Over time, this internalized communication style can blossom into mastery. Psychologically, Saturn retrograde in the third house often means the person is a private thinker. They may have spent much of their youth feeling misunderstood or unable to express themselves fully. This can lead to a sense of isolation in early years, especially in school or among peers. However, this placement encourages a growth path toward disciplined thoughts and communication. These people often develop into meticulous writers, researchers, or communicators who value accuracy and depth. Their ideas are usually well considered and impactful because they have been filtered through rigorous internal scrutiny. Socially, relationships with siblings can be serious, complicated sometimes, or fraught with responsibilities. Sometimes Saturn retrograde here indicates the native had to take or mature roles within sibling relationships or experience significant life lessons through those bonds. Challenges and growth opportunities: delayed or cautious speech, feeling misunderstood, difficult sibling relationships, slow learning curve. Growth occurs as the native learns to trust their voice and values their own perspective, develops patience with the learning process, appreciating slow and steady progress, cultivates deep knowledge and becomes an expert in their chosen field, uses their communication skills to mentor or teach others with authority. One example that maybe you will say, it's not possible this, is Volodymyr Zelensky. As you already know, he's the president of Ukraine, but before he used to be an actor. So he succeeded to get mastery in communication through his vocation and his profession. Very interesting. And this Saturn retrograde is in Leo, so it's also the test of leadership. And really, he's good. When Saturn is retrograde in the fourth house, it's about connecting to home, parents, and sense of belonging. This can manifest as a profound internal struggle with emotional security and family legacy. This placement often indicates that the native's early home life was marked by responsibility, restriction, or emotional reserve. Perhaps a parent was emotionally distant, absent, or particularly strict, leaving the individuals with a sense of solitude or the need to grow up faster than their peers. The retrograde quality adds an introspective layer, meaning these experiences are often felt deeply but privately, creating a rich internal world of contemplation and sometimes melancholy. In traditional astrology, the fourth house is the bottom of the sky, symbolizing roots and the unconscious foundation. Saturn here represents the weight of family karma, ancestral debts, and the burden of emotional history. Retrograde Saturn intensifies these weights, turning the lessons inward and often making the native carrying this burden silently. Arabic astrology often interprets Saturn retrograde in the fourth house as a sign of solitude or solitude in old age, or a lifelong journey of emotional self-reliance. It may also suggest delayed or difficult inheritance, whether material or emotional, requiring patient and careful management. Psychologically, Saturn retrograde in the fourth house can generate a deep-seated feeling of emotional containment. The native might be cautious about expressing vulnerability, preferring to keep their feelings locked away. This emotional restraint is often a learned survival mechanism stemming from early family dynamics. There is usually a strong inner drive to create a solid foundation and a safe sanctuary, but the process is slow and deliberate. Many with this placement build their homes or emotional lives with care and responsibility, valuing privacy and stability above all else. Over time, these people may develop profound emotional resilience and a mature understanding of their inner world, They often become self-reliant in dealing with their emotions and may even cultivate skills in helping others navigate family or psychological issues. Challenges that can happen here, it's about emotional isolation, heavy family responsibilities, karmic patterns came from family, delayed emotional fulfillment. Growth is found in learning to embrace vulnerability and express feelings in safe context, establishing boundaries that protect emotional well-being, healing ancestral wounds through conscious awareness and forgiveness, creating a nurturing environment that reflects one's authentic self. An example of displacement is Henry Mancini. He used to have Saturn retrograde in Libra in the 4th house. Saturn retrograde in the 5th house can manifest as hesitancy or inhibition in creative self-expression and romantic life. The native may feel cautious about showing their true colors or expression joy freely, especially in youth. This internal focus means that pleasure and creativity often come later in life, after much reflection and maturation. The lessons here often involve learning how to balance responsibility with fun and developing a deep appreciation for the serious side of joy. Traditional astrology, it said that displacement tests the person's ability to enjoy life's pleasures. Retrograde Saturn intensifies this test by making it more introspective. The native might face delays or difficulties in having children or may experience serious, sometimes burdensome relationships with offspring. Arabic astrology often views the 5th house as connected to the fate of children and creativity. Saturn retrograde here can indicate karmic lessons linked to procreation or creative legacy. It might also suggest that children have a special destiny that requires mature, disciplined parenting. Psychologically, Saturn retrograde here in the 5th house may cause the individuals to suppress or hide their creative impulses. Fear of failure, criticism, or not being good enough can lead to block in the artistic or playful expression. Romantically, displacement often suggests serious, sometimes delayed relationships. The native may be hesitant to fully open their heart or may experience love as a responsibility rather than just pleasure. However, these challenges also foster growth over time. Natives with Saturn retrograde in the 5th house often develop a mature, disciplined approach to creativity and love. Their work tends to have depth and lasting value, and their relationships are often built on strong foundations or trust and commitment. Challenges include creative blocks or delays, delayed or serious romantic relationship, difficulties with children, fear of vulnerability. Growth is coming when learns to embrace creativity as a form of discipline and self-discovery, recognize the value of slow building joy in relationships, develops patience with the creative process and allow themselves to experiment, balances responsibility with playfulness and emotional openness. The person that everybody knows from the history is Mata Hari, the double spy or whatever she used to be, with the Saturn retrograde in the 5th house in Pisces. So she was able to use the charming and she mastered the, let's say, romantic adventures due to a very clear mission. Okay, the final of her life we know. If you don't know her story, search on the internet. Saturn retrograde in the 6th house, it's about work and health. Its retrograde motion brings a deeply introspective and sometimes challenging energy to how you approach your daily tasks and physical well-being. People with displacement often experience a strong inner drive to be reliable and responsible, but may face recurring health issues or chronic conditions that require constant attention and care. These health matters often serve as lessons in humility and perseverance, teaching the native about boundaries and self-care. In work, displacement may manifest as feeling burdened by daily responsibilities or struggling with restrictive routines. However, the retrograde quality suggests that the native processes these challenges internally, gradually developing a mature and methodical work ethic that withstands trials over time. Traditionally, the sixth house is linked to servant, employees, illness, daily routines. Saturn here often indicates serious, sometimes difficult relationships with coworkers or subordinates. Retrograde Saturn intensifies this by highlighting inner conflicts or unresolved issues related to work and health. Arabic astrology views Saturn retrograding here as a sign of karmic duties and trials in service or health. The native may be called to serve others in humble or behind-the-scene roles, where persistence and discipline are essential. These roles may not always bring recognition, but contribute significantly to personal growth. Psychologically, Saturn retrograde here cultivates a sense of responsibility that can sometimes feel overwhelming. The native may be prone to internalizing stress related to work or health, leading to anxiety or perfectionism. There is often a tendency to push oneself hard, sometimes ignoring physical limits until health problems arise. This placement teaches the importance of balancing effort with rest and developing sustainable routines. On the positive side, people with displacements tend to be diligent, dependable, and highly disciplined workers. Their perseverance in the face of difficulty often inspires others. They excel in roles that require precision, patience, and steady progress. Challenges include chronic health issues that the native need to deal with. Work-related stress is linked with the chronic health because if you are too stressed, perfectionism that can be a problem. Difficult coworkers or subordinates. Growth is coming when learns to listen to their body and respect its limits, not push too much. Develops healthy daily habits that support long-term well-being. Finds fulfillment in service and work that aligns with their values. Cultivates patience and accepts the progress may be slow but steady. An example of the person that have the Saturn retrograde in the sixth house in Pisces is David Cameron. In Cameron's case, the lasting impact of Brexit reflects this, an attempt to manage complex realities that spiraled far beyond control, despite good intention or structured planning. He wanted to make a good deed, but the result was not so good. Maybe people that are listening to this vlog can give me a feedback if the Brexit was a good thing or not. Saturn retrograde in the seventh house, bringing seriousness and structure to partnerships. When retrograde Saturn's lessons become more internalized, making relationships deeply personal and often tied to past life or unconscious karmic patterns. People with displacement may experience delays in forming lasting partnerships, or their relationships may come with heavy lessons about commitment, trust, and boundaries. They tend to approach relationships cautiously, sometimes fearing vulnerability or the loss of independence. Displacement often manifests as a need to build relationships on solid, realistic foundations rather than fleeting romantic ideas. The person may be drawn to partners who challenge them to grow or who represent karmic lessons to be worked through. In traditional astrology, Saturn in the 7th house is a serious influence of partnerships, often indicating responsibilities, restriction, or challenges within marriage or business relationships. Retrograde Saturn intensifies these themes by internalizing them, learning to profound self-reflection on how the native engaged with others. Arabic astrology suggests that Saturn retrograde here may indicate karmic debts in relationships, perhaps unfinished business from past lives, or inherited family patterns that affect how the native connect with partners. There may be one significant formative relationship that defines much of the native's life path. Psychologically, this placement can create hesitation or fear around intimacy. The native may struggle with testing others fully or may feel that relationships comes with heavy responsibility or obligation rather than joy and ease. There is often a tendency to analyze or overthink relationship dynamics, which can create emotional distance or difficulty fully committing. However, these challenges also foster profound self-awareness and growth. The native learns to set healthy boundaries and to value long-term stability over short-term passion. Partnerships may begin later in life or after periods of solitude and personal development. The native's approach to partnership is often mature and pragmatic, seeking reliability and depth rather than excitement alone. Challenges include delayed or difficulties commitments, fear of vulnerability, karmic relationship patterns, balancing independence and togetherness. Growth is coming when learns to embrace vulnerability as a strength rather than a weakness, develops patience and trust in the timing of relationships. A famous person that have this placement is Jude Law, with Saturn retrograde in the 7th house in Gemini. Later in life, a true partnership may arrive later when lessons are integrated and learned. Saturn retrograde in the 8th house. It indicates a profound internal process involving control, fear, and acceptance around the most intense aspect of the life: loss, intimacy, and transformation. People with this placement may face recurring challenges involving shared finances, inheritances, or debts. These difficulties, however, are not merely external obstacles. They often reflect internal struggles with trust, vulnerability, and surrender. Because of the 8th house is connected to what lies beneath the surface, Saturn retrograde here fosters a powerful capacity for introspection and psychological depth. The native is often drawn to explore hidden fears, taboos, and the mysteries of life and death, learning to build strength through this confrontation. In traditional astrology, Saturn's presence in the 8th house is associated with serious lessons regarding mortality and the cyclical nature of life. When retrograde Saturn effect is intensified, suggesting internalized struggles with acceptance of change, endings, and the unknown. Arabic astrology highlights displacement of inherited karma and complex obligations. Saturn retrograde here can indicate burdens carried from ancestors or a necessity to face difficult family legacies. The native may be tested with transforming these inherited challenges into sources of power and wisdom. Psychologically, Saturn retrograde in the 8th house often means the individual wrestles privately with fear, all kinds of fears, of loss, betrayal, or emotional exposure. There may be a deep resistance to surrender or to allowing others into their emotional or material world. This placement can create a guarded personality, someone who protects their inner self carefully and may struggle to trust fully. Yet over time, these inner defenses often give way to profound resilience and a mature understanding of intimacy and transformation. The process of facing mortality and endings is a recurring theme, sometimes manifesting as a personal or familial experience with death or serious loss. The lessons here often involve accepting impermanence and finding strength through renewal. Challenges include fear of vulnerability, financial burdens, emotional isolation, resistance to transformation. And the growth is coming when learns to embrace vulnerability as a path to deeper intimacy, develops trust in the natural flow of transformation and renewal, takes responsible control over shared resources with maturity. An example of this is Gerard Butler, the actor, that have Saturn retrograde in the 8th house, in Taurus. Even in his role, you can find him in the situations that are dealing with loss, survival, sacrifice, and power reclaimed under pressure. This is not a coincidence. They resonate with the 8th house Saturn archetype, the warrior who has earned his grit the hard way. Saturn retrograde in the 9th house. This placement often means the native approaches these areas with caution and a need of personal validation rather than blind faith. People with this placement tend to question inherited belief systems, religious teachings, and philosophical ideas. Their spiritual growth may be slow and deliberate, marked by periods of doubt and re-evaluation that can result in a more mature, grounded in experience and critical thinking rather than acceptance of a dogma. Traditional astrology associates this placement with wisdom, law, and travel. Saturn here governs the serious study and discipline required for true understanding, and when it's retrograde, Saturn influence turns inward, encouraging self-reflection on spiritual matters and the reconsideration of one's worldview. In Arabic astrology, often this placement is seen as a place of faith and the higher mind. Saturn retrograde here may indicate restrictions on foreign travel or delayed opportunities for higher education. However, these delays are often purposeful, meant to foster deeper internal growth before external expansion. Psychologically, Saturn here fosters a skeptical and disciplined mind. The native might resist accepting beliefs, which can sometimes isolate them from mainstream religious or philosophical groups. Intellectually, this placement demands rigorous study and a slow but thorough assimilation of knowledge. This placement can also bring challenges in integrating broad perspectives or adopting to different cultures due to caution or reserved nature. Challenges include skepticism and doubt, delayed higher education or travel, isolation in beliefs, rigid thinking. Growth is found when embraces a flexible and open-minded approach to learning, learns to balance skepticism with faith and trust to the unknown, pursues spiritual and intellectual growth as a lifelong journey rather than a destination, shares their wisdom in ways that inspire rather than alienate others. And very good example in this is Edith Piaf, that used to have Saturn retrograde in the 9th house. Piaf didn't sing only for France. She became France's voice of heartbreak, of longing, of devotion beyond death. She turned pain into philosophy and sorrow into art. It's a hallmark of 9th house Saturn retrograde, the ability to translate difficulty into meaning. Saturn retrograde in the 10th house brings serious introspective energy to professional life and public image, emphasizing lessons in patience, self-discipline, and internal leadership. People with displacement experience a slower rise of recognition or leadership roles. They may feel unseen or unappreciated in the early stages of their career, but this often builds a solid internal foundation of patience, resilience, and maturity that supports long-term success. Traditionally, Saturn in this place symbolizing authority, discipline, and legacy, and being retrograde here highlights the internal challenges related to these themes, such as self-doubt, perfectionism, and rethinking one's public role. Arabic astrology views Saturn here as indicated rulers or leaders who carry heavy responsibilities and must balance personal integrity with public duty. The retrograde motion suggests that the native's path to authority involves such a significant inner work and overcoming personal obstacles. Psychologically, Saturn here often creates a tendency towards self-criticism and high standards in the professional realm. Challenges include career delays or slow recognition, self-doubt or perfectionism, fear of public failure, balancing personal and public life. Growth is coming when cultivate patience and trust in their unique timing, developing confidence through self-awareness and preparation, embraces leadership as a form of service rather than status, learns to balance ambition with authenticity and personal well-being. An example of this is Romy Schneider, that used to have Saturn retrograde in 10th house in Aries. Saturn retrograde in 11th house, focusing on internalizing these themes rather than expressing them. It's about how the native approaches friendship, social groups, and their vision for the future. People with displacement often have a cautious or reserved approach to socializing. They may find it difficult to trust groups or fully open to the friends, preferring a smaller cycle of loyal and dependable companions rather than a large group. Displacement fosters a deep inner vision, but the manifestation of goals and social ambitions tends to be slow and methodical. In traditional astrology, displacement represents hopes, wishes, and the support we receive from others. Saturn here indicates the social connections and aspirations require effort, patience, and responsibility. When retrograde, lessons become more introspective, signaling karmic tasks related to social trust and community involvement. Arabic astrology suggests that Saturn in this place marks a visionary who works behind the scenes. These people often prefer to build their social influence gradually through careful planning and enduring commitment rather than instant gratification or popularity. Psychologically, Saturn in this place may cause feeling of social isolation or difficulty feeling fully accepted in groups. The person might be wary of social dynamics or skeptical about others' intentions, leading to guarded interactions. Despite this, there is a strong internal drive to connect meaningfully and contribute to society in a lasting way. The natives' ideals are often serious and well thought out, though they may feel frustrated by slow progress or obstacles in achieving their dreams. Challenges include social hesitation, slow manifestation of goals, feelings of isolation, overly cautious social approach. And growth is coming when learning to balance cautious with openness in social connections, developing patience and persistence in pursuing long-term goals, embracing unique version and working steadily toward it, building meaningful friendship based on mutual trust and support. A famous person born with displacement is Giacomo Puccini, that used to have Saturn retrograde in the 11th house in Leo. Puccini had to grapple inwardly with fears of rejection by peers. Yet this same placement often leads to an extraordinary ability to craft enduring, emotionally resonant art, not for fame but for a place of responsibility to beauty and form. His operas, known for their depth and emotional realism, reflect the 11th house concern with creating something that outlives the self. Saturn retrograde in the 12th house connects to the deepest layers of the psyche and spirituality. People with this placement often experience a strong inner pull toward solitude, spiritual practice, or psychological exploration. However, the placement can also indicate a heavy karmic burden, manifesting as hidden fears, self-imposed limitations, or struggles with invisible enemies, such as mental health challenges. Because of the 12th house is the domain of the unseen, Saturn retrograde here works quietly behind the scene, shaping the native's inner world through discipline, enduring, and sometimes solitude. Maybe you know or not, but Saturn in this 12th house is the joy of Saturn according with the Hellenistic astrology. Traditionally, Saturn in this house brings structure to what is normally formless and hidden. And when retrograde, this effect is intensified, making the native's challenges more internalized and karmic in nature. Arabic astrology viewed this placement as a realm of mystical experience, but also one of the secret enemies and hidden difficulties. Saturn retrograde here may indicate obstacles coming from unseen sources or internal psychological battles that require patience and spiritual discipline to overcome. Psychologically, this placement can indicate a tendency to internalize stress, fears, and anxious. The native may struggle feeling of isolation or alienation, sometimes creating self-imposed barriers to connection. Spiritually, this placement often encourages a deep, lifelong commitment to inner discipline and transformation. This is very good for monks, for spiritual practices, and for people that are feeling well with themselves and working with self. So challenges include hidden fears and anxieties that should work with them and to let them go. Self-isolation, but if you are self-isolation, it means that you work with yourself, because otherwise it's not a good idea. Mental health struggles, also it's about depression, anxiety, and feelings of unfulfillment. Growth is coming when engaging in spiritual or psychological practices that foster self-awareness, learning to face fears and limitations with compassion and patience and with love, using solitude as a tool for healing rather than avoidance, embracing the transformation power of inner discipline and surrender. And a famous person with displacement in Barack Obama, with Saturn retrograde in the 12th house. So, look in your natal chart, see where do you have Saturn, which zodiac sign and which house, and if it's retrograde. And I am waiting your questions and comments down below. How it's working in your case, a Saturn retrograde in the house that you have. I wish you all the best. See you next time. Bye-bye.